happened instead, I began to apply these lessons, let's say, to my very good friend Jain. And so what happened is what brought me crawling back to the Catholic Church on my hands and knees. And that journey back did indeed begin with Jain. When she came to me and was asking me about end-of-life issues, she said to me, you know, for example, if I wanted to end my life, is it a very grave wrong? Is it a sin? Would God be upset with me? Would I go to hell, and would my family be devastated? And so I answered her almost word for word according to what this channeled spirit Abraham had said in their little booklets that I got weekly and monthly. So from that very recorded material from this channeled spirit, I said to her, okay, Jane, I'm glad I will finally be able to awaken you to the truth. Is it wrong? According to Abraham, every death is a suicide, they said, because we all in charge of when we decide to reemerge back into the non-physical. That's what they called it. They said, it's not wrong. You've only been, because there is no good or bad, right or wrong, you've only been conditioned by society and by religious institutions. You've been conditioned to think it's wrong. And would your family be devastated? Well, they would only be devastated if you visualize them that way, because you create what you think about. So if you think they'll be devastated, they would be, but you could also visualize them being supportive and create that instead and attract that. And I said, last of all, is it a sin? Would God be upset with you? There is no heaven or hell, good or bad, right or wrong. Would God be upset with you? And I quoted to her Abraham's words, this that you are calling God, that which you call God, is nothing more or less than the law of attraction and the universe that responds to it, and you are free to attract anything that you desire, even death. And so she thought about this for a while, and then she went ahead and went to bed that night. It had gotten very late. She spent the night at my house. She woke up the next morning, left my home, checked herself into a hotel room, and drank poison until she died. All by herself, sitting on this hard, cold floor in the bathroom. And I remember when my husband came in, who was my boyfriend at the time, came in and said, Jane is gone. And I said, yes, I know she's gone. She spent the night, she just left. And he said, no, you don't understand. Jane is gone. She's killed herself. And in that moment, this is how, and I want you to know this is how the devil works. And this is how the devil's influenza, when he influences us, it's usually right down the line. In more cases than I care to recount, it's usually only when it's too late that we realize the mistake that has been made. I remember God's grace at that moment let me feel how sad she had been, and why hadn't I recognized that? My first words to him were, oh, she was so sad. She was so sad. And I've often told people, I had someone at her memorial service ask me, that last night that you were with her, why didn't you hug her, tell her that you loved her, and that you would miss her if she was gone? And I didn't even have the words to explain to her that looking back on it, I now realize I was no longer seeing Jane as a person. Everything was about energy and vibration and about what would be attracted and what could be created to fuel my bliss so that I could have a high vibration. And I look back and I realize these are the side effects and the horrible consequences that people just don't see coming with some of these New Age spiritualities. Take, for example, and you're going to hear in the second part of my talk, you're going to hear about how God had forbidden so many of the practices that I had been dabbling in and engaging in. The very things that I thought were going to make me a more loving, compassionate person were the very things that brought death and destruction, abortion, divorce, it was hell on earth. I thought that I was teaching people how to experience heaven because I was teaching that all there is love, and really what I was helping to bring about was hell on earth. And so we know who's at the bottom of that. The evil spirits in the spiritual realm. That is who is behind all of this. It's a replay of that same lie in Genesis. Did God really tell you that you can't eat from every tree in the garden? Instilling that doubt. I can almost imagine that serpent saying to Eve, it's not that you can't eat of every tree. You've only been conditioned, to believe that you can't eat from every tree. It's always a repeat of that same lie. So practices like the horoscope, astrology, crystals, the Enneagram, channeling spirits, going to a medium, magic, sorcery, casting spells, wearing certain charms. God had forbidden these practices, and he said, because you will be defiled by them. And that word defiled has so many layers. The original meaning just means that you will become unclean by coming in contact with that which is unclean. But the deeper meaning is it is going to twist you and distort you and make you into something that no longer resembles the image of God. And this is how the good angels were distorted and twisted until they became demons. You're going to experience the same fall, so do not do these things. Well, one of those things that was forbidden was this thing called divining. Let there not be a sorcerer, a magician, a wizard, or a diviner among you. And you think, well, what is divination? Divination is, and again, it's this ancient practice, but we see people doing it today and calling it the new science or the power of the mind, or the fact that all energy vibrates so we can learn how to read the energy. And it's none of those things. It's divination. It's when a person is seeking to gain hidden knowledge from invisible forces or entities. So this would be like if you use a crystal to find out if the man you're dating would be a good husband, and if the crystal swings to the right, the answer is yes. If the crystal swings to the left, the answer is no. It would be fortune telling, reading the lines on your palm, consulting your horoscope. These are all forms of divining. When people find out that God had forbidden this from the very beginning, they don't often know why, and it's only I had rock solid evidence from my own experience. I saw with my own two eyes how dangerous this stuff can be. We are not to be seeking guidance from hidden forces and entities in the spiritual realm, because any entity in the spiritual realm helping you to gain knowledge from this forbidden practice would not be a spirit of God, and so therefore any information they give you is meant only to harm you and deceive you and mislead you. They hate us that much that they're going to tell you whatever they have to tell you to get you to suffer, and they'll be happy when they do it. So here I am with Jane that evening, and before we went to bed that night, and I had told her, no such thing as good or bad, you're free to attract anything you want, even death. And I saw that she was not quite on board with this, or she looked sad or forlorn, or like she couldn't wrap her mind around this, and I got frustrated, and I said, listen, Jane, if you don't believe me, maybe you'll believe the universe, so let's ask the universe. And she says, ask the universe, and as if the universe is God, which, by the way, in P.S., the universe, the cosmos, is not God. The universe and the cosmos is a creation of God, the creator, but God is God, and the creation is the creation. And this cosmos is not going to tell you anything. God is the one who wants to help lead us and guide us and direct us. So I tell Jane, we'll ask the universe. She said, how do you ask the universe? I said, we'll pull a rune stone. And she said, well, what's a rune stone? I said, okay, just real quick. And there's tons of this kinds of stuff. There's, burning smoke and seeing which way the smoke rises or wafts. But this was rune stones. And what this is an ancient pagan practice where there's these little stones in a bag. Each stone has a symbol on it. You ask a question, and then according to the symbol, you know what to do. For example, an arrow straight up would be yes. An arrow pointing down would be no. A wavy line would mean that's going to cause a lot of commotion. A straight line would mean don't do anything. Stand still. Just don't do anything yet. So you're going to get guidance from these rune stones because the universe is going to speak to you through these stones. So I said, okay, Jane, your issue, end of life issues, suicide, yes or no, good or bad, right or wrong. I reached into the bag and I said, look, Jane, it's death. And it was the death stone, a big zero. And I remember she pushed herself away from the table and she said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. This is really frightening me. And then she went to bed that night. But you see, we have those tiny, tiny windows of opportunity where as a Christian, if we know the truth and we know God's word and we know who is God and who we are and how precious life is, and that each one of us is a precious child of God. In that, and you see, part of my message is that you can't go back. I can't go back. I cannot undo what was done. I can pray for Jane's soul now, and if God is as merciful as I know him to be, that he would have mercy on her soul, because she was really asking, and it was the person, who was just on that highway to hell, where I would never be home with God our Father and the angels and saints if I'd stayed on that path. So it's only a miracle of God.
وكذلك فتنا بعضهم ببعض ليقولوا أهؤلاء من الله عليهم من بيننا أليس الله بأعلم بالشاكرين وإذا جاءك الذين يؤمنون بآياتنا فقل سلام عليكم كتب ربكم على نفسه الرحمة أنه من عمل منكم سوءا بجهالة ثم تاب من بعده وأصلح فأنه غفور رحيم وكذلك نفصل الآيات ولتستبين سبيل المجرمين